Hello everyone. This lesson is about comparative and absolute advantage. So it's in the latter chapters in our textbook, and some of it's not intuitive, so you should probably pay attention. There's lots of problems in the backs of those chapters that you should work. So I've created a little bit of PowerPoint. Let me see if I can get to that for you. Alright, so what is the difference between comparative and absolute advantage? Well, this is my definition. The one in the book is a little different, and if you don't like my definition, you can look at that one or Google another. But absolute advantage refers to the amount produced per unit. A country has an absolute advantage in something if they can produce more of that product than their trading partners can with the same amount of inputs. Then comparative advantage is a completely different thing. Comparative advantage refers to opportunity cost, and this is the one that's kind of hard. A country has a comparative advantage in something if what they have to give up to produce that product is less than what their trading partners have to give up. So again, if you don't like my definitions, you can Google them and maybe you'll find something you like a little better. But I think it'll become obvious when we get down to this exercise that's going to come up in a minute. So consider the following table. Now the way you read this is those numbers that you see there represent outputs. Those are not prices. Those are outputs. So you'd read it like this. Country 1 in one day with a packet of resources can make 5 units of good A or 10 units of good B. And country 2 with one packet of resources in one day could make 10 units of good A or only 4 units of good B. So that's the way you read this thing. So in terms of absolute and comparative advantage, it would be like this. Country 2 has an absolute advantage in good A because look, in one day with a packet of resources they can make more than country 1 can. And in terms of good B, country 1 has an absolute advantage. In terms of comparative advantage, in this particular simple example, the answers are the same. Country 1 has a comparative advantage in good B because think about what they have to give up to get a good B. They have to give up 1/2 of good A. Since 1 unit of good A could make 2 units of good B, to get an extra good B they have to give up 1 unit of good A. So the opportunity cost of good B in country 1 is 1/2 a unit of good A. In country 2 it's very different. In country 2 it's 4 to 10, so that's a little more than double. So to get 1 unit of good B in country 2, they would have to give up a little more than 2 units of good A. In fact, they'd have to give up 10/4, which was 5/2, so what, 2.5 units of good A. So country 1 has a comparative advantage in good B because its opportunity cost is lower, and country 2 has a comparative advantage in good A. So the way these countries would trade, it should be quite obvious. So this is a template here. So you have country 1 and country 2, and this template is written from the perspective of country 1. So country 1 exports to country 2, and country 1 imports from country 2. So the way they would trade based on that table I had up there is that country 1 would export good B, and country 2 would export good A. So you might stop this video and back it up a little bit and make sure that you can see that that's the way it will be. Alright, now let's try one a little bit harder. In this case, country 1 has an absolute advantage in good A, but neither country has an absolute advantage in good B. It's a tie. So how will these countries trade? Well, remember, trade depends on the comparative advantage. It doesn't depend at all on absolute advantage. So see who's got the comparative advantage in what. So in country 1 they can get an extra unit of good B by giving up 1/2 a unit of good A. You see that? Because if 5 make 10, 1 would make 2. So to get an extra good B you'd give up 1/2 of A. In country 2 it's different. 3 would make 10, or 1 would make a little more than 3, 3 1/3, right? So to get an extra unit of good B in country 2, you would have to give up only 1/3, or actually a little less than 1/3 of a unit of good A. To get an extra unit of good B in country 1, you would have to give up 1/2. So country 2 has a comparative advantage in good B because its opportunity cost is lower, and country 1 has a comparative advantage in good A because its opportunity cost is lower in good A. So let's look at it that way. In terms of good A, imagine you were in country 1 and you wanted an extra unit of good A. What would you have to give up? You'd have to give up 2 units of good B to get an extra unit of good A. In country 2, if you wanted an extra unit of good A, what would you have to give up? You'd have to give up a little more than 3 units of good B to get an extra unit of good A. So in this case, what would happen is, okay, now again, you could stop this video and see if you can figure this out. But in this case, country 1 would export good A, and country 2 would export good B. I hope you got that right. Now let's try another one. Now this one is really hard, and this example comes to us from David Ricardo back in, I think, 1820 or so. And it's because of this example that David Ricardo is sometimes called the founder of modern trade theory, because it's counterintuitive. If you look at this thing, country 2 has an absolute advantage in good A and also in good B. And so you might think, well, gee, they're more productive in both goods. They would never trade with country 1. But David Ricardo pointed out that that is not true. David Ricardo pointed out that absolute advantage doesn't really matter. What really matters is comparative advantage. So this case is actually very much like the last one. Country 1 has a comparative advantage in good A because they can get good A by giving up only 2 units of good B. Country 2, on the other hand, if they wanted another unit of good A, they would have to give up 3 units of good B. So country 1 has a comparative advantage in good A, and country 2 has a comparative advantage in good B. Now, you should stop this video and see if you can figure that out. Country 2 has a comparative advantage in good B. The reason they do is because in country 2, if you wanted an extra unit of good B, you'd only have to give up about 1/3 of a unit of good A, just like in the last example. So in this case, again, country 1 would export good A, and country 2 would export good B. Alright, now you can sort of figure them out logically like that every time, but over the years I've had so many students complain that I've developed these rules for figuring out this flow of trade. And to tell you the truth, I don't think memorizing these rules is such a great thing if you're really trying to understand intuitively what's going on. But a lot of students have just sort of forced me to generate these rules because they will give you the right answers even when you don't understand what's going on. Okay, so here are the rules. Rule number 1 says, search for the cheap good in each country. That is, cheap in terms of its opportunity cost. If different, then each country exports its cheap good. So like in the first case, I can't really go back, but in the first case, the cheap good was different in each country, therefore each country exports the cheap good. Remember now, those numbers are not prices, those numbers are output. Alright, rule number 2 says, well, okay, if both countries have the same cheap good, which I think was example number 2, then you have to search where it's absolutely the cheapest. In other words, somebody is going to be more productive in that good than the other, absolutely the cheapest. Then, when you figure that out, that country will export the cheap good, and the other country will export whatever's left over. Alright, so that takes care of every situation except the possibility that there's no difference. In other words, it could be that neither good is cheaper, or neither country has it cheaper, that it's the same in both. And in that case, if there's no difference, then they don't trade. So, here's a little example that will try to help you. Let's do it by searching for the cheap good. In this case, country 1, the cheap good is good B, and in country 2, the cheap good is good B, and there's no difference. There's no difference. So they don't trade. Can you see that? I hope so. This is an easy one. Now let's try this one. This one's a little harder, but again, they won't trade because the good B is a cheap good in country 1, and it's also the cheap good in country 2. And if you notice, the opportunity costs are the same in both cases, 2 for 1. So again, they don't trade. Alright, now consider this one. Again, they won't trade. Even though it looks very different, the internal opportunity costs are the same in both countries. Again, it's 2 for 1 in country 1 and 2 for 1 in country 2. So those 3 examples apply to the last rule, rule number 3, that says if there's no difference in the opportunity cost between good A and good B in the 2 countries, they won't trade. Okay, so I hope you found that helpful, and it's laid out slightly different in your book. So if I didn't do a good job explaining it to you, then hopefully the book will do better. Good luck.